seen and presentations done by Emer and Spence in an excellent way, and I introduced already the 4 breakout sessions and the rapporteur teams or rapporteurs of the 4 breakout sessions. And I think these are important topics we have to discuss. So you can now work in your breakout sessions, and please enter the room now. You have been agreed to, and then we will come back with the reports of the rapporteurs then after these breakout sessions, and have then time to wrap up from the 4 breakout groups, and then 30 minutes for deeper discussion or questions which might be raised. So thank you very much. So, and a lot of success in your breakouts.
Nikolai, are you on the line? Hello?
It's a disaster.
Nikolai, are you on the line?
Hey, Xavier, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Oh, okay. I think
So,
we should.
We are only 8 people who have been assigned so far, so maybe we should just give it 1 more minute.
Okay.
Maybe the assignments to groups.
Nikolai, shall I try to share my screen so that we have the slides? What would you do?
Otherwise, I have the slides.
Okay, good.
I actually just added an extra slide with the list of questions that you sent me.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
So, but maybe I only see 8 participants right now. We have Audun, good to see you, Audun. We have Carlos, we have you, Sonia, Pauline. I don't know, since the initial list you got was much longer, I wonder if we need to give people a little bit of time. Yeah.
In my experience, it hasn't been easy with the technical part. I had to restart and do a lot of things to find you.
Yeah, and now I open the list of participants and I cannot make it go away again. Let us see here.
There's something at the top to the left, Nikolai. Little arrow, and if you click that one, you...
Yeah, no, there really isn't. There is no little arrow.
all the way to the top, to the left, over the search field. Got it?
Xavier, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
How many people do we have on your screen now?
I have 9 participants.
9, okay.
Yeah, I think we could probably start because still
Yeah,
don't
we
know
should.
how many people will join.
My problem is I opened the list of participants and I cannot close it again. It doesn't have a little
Actually, you
arrow.
have the same problem. Yeah, you have to a small arrow to the going downwards.
There is no
Yeah.
little arrow. I know Audun said there was a little arrow, and I cannot see a little arrow. I have.
Maybe you should try a different display, full screen or something.
Maybe that's a very good idea.
You have the view. You have the view.
Yes, that was the solution, Audun. Thank you. I will give you a job in our IT support unit immediately.
You would regret it bitterly.
I would regret it. Is that what you think? Okay, let's see here. Here we go. Let us see, share screen. Window, here we go. Share. And full screen, hopefully.
Excellent, we see it.
Yes, and do you see full screen, which you hopefully should see in a few seconds?
Not
Okay,
yet.
I'm getting a text message from someone who is a participant who's actually online from the DKMA, but is not listed on the list of participants. But that means that we are more than we think.
Okay, good.
So maybe we should start now. So that's very good. Welcome from me. I'm Nikolai Brun. I'm the head of medical strategy and innovation at the DKMA. And the title of this parallel breakout session number 4 is Generation of Evidence for a Better Patient Access and Health Data Space and Big Data. Shared data for better communication and coordination. And I will be sharing the rapporteur job with Sylvia Kurtz from the EMA. And maybe, Xavier, you will just briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Xavier Kurtz. I am a physician and a pharmacoepidemiologist. I'm the head of the data analytics work stream at European Medicine Agency.
Thank you very much. And given that we are more than it looks like on the screen, and a good colleague of mine also just went in through the door here at the agency and said she's also online, but cannot be looked at, seen in the list of participants. So maybe we are a lot more. What Xavier and I thought about was that we would just briefly, in this one slide, recap what the Big Data Task Force report actually says on data sharing, data access, and data ownership. And there are 3 important bullet points here that I'd just like to take you through. And it's on the topic of ensuring a secure and ethical data sharing culture. Firstly, the Big Data Task Force report as published on hma.eu and on the EMA website, says that data sharing and access to data fundamentally depends on creating a trusted environment with transparency as regards the intended use of the information and compliance with data protection laws. Secondly, it says that both data privacy and data sharing can and should coexist. That's a very important point. They are not exclusive, they should coexist. And on data ethics, it says that studies that evaluate moral problems related to data, including generation, recording, curation, processing, dissemination, sharing, and use, algorithms and corresponding practices in order to formulate and support morally good solutions, e.g. right conducts or right values. And I would just like to show you this slide, which Xavier, maybe you want to take us through these 3 points before we go to the questions for the group.
Yes, so if you can move to the next slide, perhaps.
Do you see slide number 2?
No.
I will try again. On data discoverability, you don't have it on your screen?
No, not me, no.
That is not so good. I will try and do a new share. This system is really not my favorite, but I will try once again. Do you have it now?
Yes. So this is a slide that is related to data sharing and data ethics, but which relates to another recommendation from the Big Data Task Force, and it is recommendations regarding data discoverability. And what it says here is that data sharing, the data sharing culture will support the data discoverability. And data discoverability is becoming a very important concept now in the implementation of Big Data Task Force. So the objective here is to help signpost industry and regulators to the best data source that exists to address a particular regulatory use case, whatever the regulatory procedure is. This will also improve the evidence available to reach benefit-risk decisions and facilitate getting better medicines to patients. So by having the right data source available and identifying the right data source. But also, this also implies that it should make data findable, accessible, interrogable, and reusable throughout automated data processing algorithms that may identify appropriate data sets. So this is probably one of the important concepts linked to that data sharing, which is in one of the recommendations that may also then be linked to a number of questions that on the implementation and implementability of these concepts.
Thank you very much. I will try now and move on to the third slide with some questions. Xavier, can you see the questions?
Yes.
Perfect. Because we thought that given that we have the benefit of this very large group, we thought it pertinent to center the discussion today around 4 questions for the breakout. And perhaps, Xavier, would you like to take us through the questions one by one, just explain briefly what they're about, and then we start with question number 1 and open for the group for comments.
Yes, so the first question relates to the trusted environment and sharing of data in a trusted environment. So, but what do we mean by sharing data? There may be a large range of different types of data that could be shared. First of all, the metadata that characterize the data source, but also this may relate to study protocols, to the programming code for the statistical analysis, the analytical data set, or perhaps even aggregated data. And it would be useful to discuss within the level of the data that should be shared to create a trusted environment. At what level of data should we then trust these the use of the data and the data set that is being used? The second question is, with whom should data be shared to demonstrate the data ethics and to build the trusted environment? Is it the general public, and that which implies that there is a publication in a public register, public institutions only, regulatory authorities or public health agencies, or could it be also pharmaceutical companies? The third question is, there has been proposal over the last year or last 2 years of what is being called a data stewardship expertise. And this would be a proposal that each study should have an adequate and relevant expertise for data sharing, data ethics, and data protections, and then follow the FAIR principles. So is it, and even there has been proposals, and a really strong proposal, that for each study there should be a part of the budget that should be systematically allocated to data stewardship. And this would be interesting to us to know, what are the views about these proposals. And then the question that we are as regulators often faced too is, are these FAIR principles to have the data findable and accessible and interrogable and so on, is it compatible with studies with regulatory objective, with sometimes confidential actually element and for new products? So these are the questions that Nicola, we thought would be maybe interested to be discussed. Maybe there are other questions actually that.
Absolutely. And I think I'll just end the slideshow now and just briefly, just so that we have the question in the chat, I'll just copy it in so we can just see it, so everyone can see this. And yeah, but otherwise, are there anyone who wants to comment on this first question? I don't see any raised hands. Otherwise, please just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, perhaps, Nicola, we could start the discussion actually by perhaps going more broader. Is what are the issues that the participants see in data sharing, in their practical experience of data sharing, and are there any particular problems, issues, or challenges?
Any comments from the group? One second, Xavier, I just have to, I don't know what's going on here because we only have 10 participants, and I know that my colleague Nicolas Janssen, he's on, but if nobody's listed on the list of participants, how can they raise their hand and ask questions? This is very mysterious. Carl, I see you are on, Carl. Do you have any experience with this system?
No, unfortunately not, and I'm facing the same problems. So I think
It's very difficult because the idea, I think we actually had 200 people signed up for this breakout, according to the list that Xavier got yesterday, and we only have 10 people on the list, but there might be 200 people online right now, and we cannot get their input. So we have you, and I see you, and I see Audun, but I do not see a whole lot of other people.
It seems also that we have questions in the chat, but which are for the other sessions than ours.
Yeah, we had the same problem last time. The chat
doesn't make it any better.
Mm-hmm.
Nikolai, maybe you could kick off the discussion by giving some examples at levels of trust in data sharing, so that we better understand. Maybe you didn't hear me now, Nikolai?
Just can I ask you then, Audun, when you say level of trust of data sharing, is it to trust the data that are being shared, or is it the process?
I was just taking notes from your question, your slide question.
Okay.
So what I got was the question was sharing data in a trusted environment. At what level should we trust the use of data? And, so it's those kind of levels I'm referring to. If you could give some examples.
Yes, well, that's the question that we often have at the EMA, and for example, in the applications and evaluation of data from and studies based on registries, can the analytical data set be shared even if it is anonymous? Because then this would allow to check or validate some of the analysis as some of the statistical model that could be performed. And there's this is also, we know some national computer authorities would like also to do it, and this has happened exceptionally, I would say, but this is rather difficult process, and so sharing study protocols, and this is something that may be made mandatory, but analytical data set or more in detailed data is difficult, and yeah, although they are completely maybe anonymous.
Xavier, I just see that there's a question in the chat from Diogo Leite. Diogo is asking, in your opinion, what would constitute a common standard for the European health data space?
Yeah, just reflecting about the meaning of the question, and common standard for what is it? At this stage, what we are looking at in the European health data space is to establish processes for being able to extract data, and at this stage we are not yet at the level of data standards for using data from different the different database holders. I could say what we would like to promote in the context of the Darwin EU, which is being implemented now, or which is going to be launched in the context of the Big Data Task Force, is that in order to have harmonized and relatively fast data analysis of database, one of the criteria should be a conversion into a common data model. This would allow much easier data sharing of aggregated data, but also a much easier and much more consistent data quality assessment and control, because this allows to apply a common data quality framework across the different data sources. So we think that probably this is a direction to which the different database holders will go over the next years, is applying a common data model, because this is in terms of data quality and implementation of common data access and data sharing, a much easier, much better solution, we think.
Thank you, Xavier. And would you care to make a bet on which data model it should be? Are you advocating for a specific model, or is any model a good one?
Well, you know that there are, first of all, two types of model. A model where common data model where the entire database is converted into a same common data model, and then there are more study-specific common data models. We are more in favor of the first solution, and currently in Europe we have the IMI Eden project, which is so funded by European Commission and through the public-private partnership, which is at a rather rapid pace converting databases throughout Europe in the OMOP common data model. And whether I don't think that there is at this stage another common data model for conversion of entire database that is being tested or used in Europe, except locally, for example, in the Nordic databases. But in the US, there is a Sentinel system that has its own common data model, but which may not be actually applicable to European database. So at this stage, I do not see any other solution than the OMOP common data model.
Thank you very much, Xavier. We actually have a new question in the chat along those lines, because obviously we're not starting in a vacuum. There are experiences around that we can harvest. And Ana Silva is asking, we have a strong experience in data sharing between member states and the ECDC for many years now. At what level those learned lessons would they be useful? So can the experiences and the lessons learned in the way that data sharing has been ongoing, for instance, between member states and ECDC, be incorporated? I guess the question is also so that we don't start from scratch, but already make use of the experiences that are in the field.
But it would be very useful, I don't know if it is possible, if the person who asked the question from Ana Silva, if Ana could explain what is the, I don't know if she is possible to connect or to take the
I think
the floor.
that I have a good colleague sitting with me here now who's also online, and I'm using her computer to see the chat because we as panelists cannot see it otherwise. And the people who are participants but not panelists cannot speak, but they can pose their views and questions in the chat. So I think this is the system that we have to work with right now. It's a bit crazy. So I'm not sure that Anna can actually speak unless we have a technician who could unmute Ana Silva. Ana Silva, can she be unmuted? Otherwise, please, Anna, explain a little bit about your experiences in the chat. No, we do not see that. Okay, Xavier, what do you think? Should we move on to question number 2?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I will just share my my screen again. And question number 2 is the one that I'm highlighting now. With whom should data be shared to demonstrate data ethics? For example, the general public through publication in the public register, public institutions only, pharmaceutical companies based on contractual agreement, etc., etc. Anyone from the panel who would like to answer this? Audun, Carl, who do you think data should be shared with?
Yeah, so for instance, here at the BfArM, we are building up a so-called research data center, which should start early next year, and that can be assessed by academia, public institutions, health statutory then institutions, but not, for instance, by pharmaceutical industry. And this research data center will get all the routine data from our statutory health care system. So this is being increased in the data available in this database, and there are still some discussions with the government here in Germany, whether, for instance, pharmaceutical industry should be able to use such data for better planning of new clinical trials and so on. But for the time being, it's not allowed that we share those data, for instance, with pharmaceutical industry. And that's an ongoing discussion here. I personally think, of course, this is big data available in a highly structured way, and it should be used as much as possible with all the requirements necessary on pseudonymization and all these technical issues for data protection which have to be met. But I think for the healthcare systems, that would be highly helpful to use this data as broad as possible.
Thank you very much, Carl. Audun, would you like to comment?
Yes, I agree with Carl that the data, that's actually the gold of the agencies, and it should be displayed in a way that can be utilized by others, and maybe in ways that we haven't invented or imagined yet. Now we're talking about the facts and the data that we have and have generated as regulators, but maybe are you talking about how to retrieve data from clinical trials, industry, things like that? What is it we're actually discussing? Is it how to get it into the regulators in form of an application or so? Or is it to sort of display all the facts and the gold that we sit on for the public and others to utilize? And that's an important question. And also in Norway, we have a lot of registries. So we are putting a lot of effort now into standardizing and being able to combine these registers and look for interesting new information.
Thank you, Audun. I think you are actually hitting the head on the nail with the dilemma, especially when it comes to what kind of data can be shared. I know that in the Nordic area, we have lots of good registries. They go back decades, and lots of people would like access to them. And for right now, authorities and research groups can have access. I know in Denmark, industry can also get access through a research engine if it's in partnership with an academic institution in Denmark. But industry cannot get access on their own. And I know I was in a meeting at the DIA with good colleagues from the industry, and basically we were discussing this issue, and I said, you know, can we not make this a two-way street? Because industry is sitting on some of the best high quality data that they have generated through the drug development process. And that's for patent reasons and general IPR reasons is not shared because of the risk of competition. And it's, in my view, a little hard to ask patients to share their data through public registries with industry if industry is not sharing their data back. I recognize the dilemma because industry is not immediately able to share their data, because then competition can pick it up and short circuit the willingness. But there are technologies in the making, especially blockchains, that can secure the origin of innovation so that data locked in a blockchain cannot be tampered with. You can only add to that. So I think that perhaps aspects of the blockchain technology could be useful in this sense to secure a two-way data sharing culture. We're not there yet, but I think that a lot of public data owners will be hesitant to share data in a one-way street scenario. I don't know if you, Audun, Carl, Xavier, if you have any views on this.
Yeah, Nicola, I'm fully supporting to this view. I think this is one of the problems in the discussions with pharmaceutical industry, as an example, that they want to use all these data available, even in a European data space coming from big population then. Of course, this is very helpful, but it should not be a one-way street, as you pulled it out. And I think then industry must be more open on these approaches on their side as well. So that's my view.
Yeah. Xavier, any views from your side? Any other panelists who have a view that you would like to share?
Just a comment on the sharing of data from regulators, is that the data that regulators have most often belong actually to the pharmaceutical companies, and therefore, or have been submitted by pharmaceutical companies like PSUR, for example, or other data. And then the data that are referred to in assessment reports are data that are from the company. So we have a very complex process, you know, for those who would like to have access to this data, of data, you know, access procedure. But this is really then, as you mentioned, a key aspect. If we as regulators would like to share the data, then industry probably would need also to accept that we share their data too. So this is we are not the owners of all the data that we have, and therefore this may be also a difficulty for us to share data.
Thank you very much. We actually have a lively chat right now, and we have a number of questions. Diego Leite is asking to all members of the panel, if you had to choose 3 key actions to enact to promote better health data governance in the EU at the moment, what would those be? Any views from the panelists? No. Then Sonia Caldera is asking, for a trusted environment, shouldn't all data be public available in aggregate level for transparency purposes? That's a bold statement. Even if it's at an aggregate level, shouldn't all data be publicly available, is Sonia Caldera asking. Javier, do you want to take that one? That's a difficult one.
Yes, this is something that we try to promote, at least for post-authorization studies, and that's why we are actively promoting the registration of the studies that are being performed either by companies or by academics, and together with the study protocol and with at least some of the results, and so aggregated results. And then what we see actually is that companies are much more compliant to our request than academia. And you mentioned, and when we discuss that with academic institutions, there may be also some interesting aspect is that you mentioned competition between companies, but you have the competition between universities.
Absolutely.
And we see that in terms of this publication of reports of studies, for example, even post-authorization safety studies done by academia, and which may be important for the public, and sometimes we are aware, and they are published very late because they wait until there has been a publication in a peer-reviewed journal, which may take sometimes 1 year. So I don't see that we should put I think this is very important, and we try really to promote it. And, you know, a few years ago, we organized a meeting with the editors of the main medical journals, and they all said that they would agree that data are being published in a website, even not, and this would not prevent publication in a scientific journal. But even for that, with that, there is the reluctance of publishing studies without, which are not peer-reviewed in a well-known journal. So we fully agree, but this is the role of all the actors in the field of research.
Yeah, I see actually among the panelists we have Elke Stahl. Elke, are you with us, and could you unmute, because I would like to ask your view on the clinical trial experience, because you have been very active in the clinical trial domain, and if you have any views on the sharing of data from clinical trials.
Well, to be honest, I just joined a couple of minutes ago, and with regard to clinical trials, I think it's valuable if we would be able to share data from clinical trials, at least in our regulatory environment. While I can see that there are some issues with sharing it in a wider sense and also between sponsors, also confidentiality and competition aspects, I think. But it would be of value to have access to more information than we have currently. From regulator point of view, I think it would be of an added value to set up and use big data also outside our network. If certain informations are taken care of, or it may be of an advantage too. But I have not a lot of insight. I only know that I think all what industry is collecting is a valuable tool, and which could be used more. For example, by us, because we work with confidentiality.
Absolutely. And I think especially during the COVID pandemic, we have seen the value of data sharing in the regulatory fora. As soon as new data on safety or efficacy on a therapeutic medicine or data on a vaccine have become available, we can see the usefulness in sharing this data with each other so that we can make the appropriate measures in our region of the world. I know that the EMA in Europe and the FDA in the US, NMPA in Japan, and PMDA in Japan and NMPA in China have been very active, and we have all worked together under the ICMA umbrella, also not sharing patient-level data, but sharing outcomes of the analysis anyway. And this has been extremely useful. Rodrigo Diaz de Almeida is asking, what actions do you believe are necessary at the EU level to support access to data for research purposes across EU borders? And that's a tricky one. Xavier, any thoughts from the EMA on data sharing across EU borders?
Well, we would of course support this sharing of data. Now, across borders, there are two aspects to be considered. First of all, of course, the data protection regulation and GDPR, and probably more importantly are the national requirement, national legislations, which differ from member state to member state. So this is probably one of the main obstacle, and probably justified, but that this is and Nikolai, I think you may be best placed than me, saying that I think from Denmark, for example, it is not possible to share data, across border at the patient level, even if anonymized. So these are this type of question that arise. But I think that for aggregated data, I don't see that there has been any problem at all to share aggregated data and fully anonymized data from across borders.
Yeah, no, I think you're actually right, and there are different legislations in different countries about that. I would like to also draw the attention to the system of federated data, which is gradually being built up, because I think that you can access data even in Denmark. If you are not in Denmark, you can access it in Denmark. You just cannot move the data out. So if you are part of a research collaboration with a Danish partner, you can actually get access to the Danish data. You can query it remotely, and you can get the results back. So this is part of the advanced analytics, the probing, the intelligent probes that you can send in to query a data set, and it returns with answers rather than raw data. And I think this whole federated system is also the thought behind the Darwin EU build-up, where we want Darwin EU not to be a giant database, but Darwin EU is a network of federated databases. So we're not actually intending for data to be moved around to a very great extent, but rather to be queried remotely, and then the answers are being sent back to the person who is cleared to ask the question, and who then can make use of the answer. So I think that's the idea behind the Darwin EU network. I would like to take it just, Xavier, how are we doing with time? Do you know?
Not much. I don't. I see. Don't we have until 4:30 or?
We have until 4:30. Okay. Okay.
I mean, to check. Yeah.
We do have another question from Patricia Vella Bonanno, who's asking, what about the sharing of data by reimbursement authorities who are buying the drug at very high price, and then the industry use the data for conditional approval, etc.? Can industry share the burden of the cost of the medicine? It's a lot of questions in one, I think, but I would like to perspectivize it at least with the fact that we are seeing, especially in the US, that a lot of the good data is coming from claims databases. I think perhaps less so in Europe, because we don't have a systematic claims data collection, but Xavier, have you had any part in discussions about access to claims data the way that it's being done in the US? I know that a lot of the Sentinel data, for instance, is built upon claims data.
Yes, well, do not have direct experience, except that the Sentinel system is working according to the federated network of database that you mentioned. So from state to state, there are no transfer of individual patient data. This is the transfer of aggregated data that are generated at the level of the local database. And this is made possible through, as I mentioned earlier, the use of a common data model, allowing to the Statistical Coordination Center to send a programming script to all the databases, which can generate very quickly then the same data.
Okay. That makes sense, and certainly that could be an inspiration for the Darwin EU, which is also operating on a federated model, and therefore we could harvest some of these experience from the Sentinel. I would perhaps like to ask a question which is not in the chat in this regard, because we saw it during the COVID pandemic, that when we wanted to query data in real time, not just real world data, but real time data, that was not immediately possible for the US. They have a considerable lag in the time it takes to get the data in, 6 to 9 months, in fact, which makes it during an acute pandemic very difficult to query the real world data beyond the MedWatch systems that they have for pharmacovigilance. Any thoughts from the panel on real-time data interrogation?
Yep. So, Karl speaking. So, I think this is one of the problems we are facing here in Germany as well. So, for instance, the health insurance company data need some time until they are then in a good usable format. And so usually this needs up to 1 year. So real-time evidence is not available to us for our research projects from routine health insurance companies, for instance. So that's really a problem we are facing now in the COVID pandemic situation. But we have this delay as well here in Germany.
Thank you, Carl. I know that the German system with all these different databases in many parts of the country is quite the challenge, and you're trying to make sense of it. Well, it keeps you fully occupied with all your people as well. I know this is not an easy task, but it actually comes, I guess, from the historical nature, not just of the German data, but also of the European data as a whole. There's a historical context to how the data has been harvested and built up. And that means that also the systems that we put in place, we're not starting from scratch with just one common data model that we can fill in. We actually have a lot of data which is really useful that we have to be able to query also historically. And in Denmark, it goes back to the 1960s with very valuable data, especially in the cardiology area, where we can make a lot of use of those data. And it would be very sad if we couldn't interrogate it. I would like to just briefly, because we only have 9 minutes left before we have to return to the plenary, and I'm just trying to access the third question. And Xavier, you wrote a question about data stewardship expertise that has been proposed to ensure adequate and relevant data sharing, data ethics, data protection, and to follow the FAIR principles. Do you agree with such a proposal? Do we need data stewardship? And should expertise be developed, and should part of the study budget be systematically allocated to data stewardship? I think that's a really good question, Xavier. Anything you want to say to contextualize this?
Just can say that there is indeed a group of, and especially in the Netherlands, which is publishing about it, stimulating it, and pushing it a lot. And I think that this makes for me. This makes sense. Whatever the name we give to this expertise, is maybe expertise in data science, in data management, or data stewardship, but having a systematic consideration to the challenges, difficulties, issues that may arise with the use of the data, and to do it proactively in the context of a study. I think this would be an excellent idea. And we have met, of course, the issue of the retraction of studies because of so much uncertainties about the data, and then request now some journals requesting that at least there should be at least have access should be provided to some of the data. So I think that this is a nice idea. Yeah, that's. I don't know what people from the person from the panel would think about it.
Any other views on data stewardship?
Nicola, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, we are going to close the parallel session at more or less 2 minutes. If you join the question and answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we are about to finish this session now, and then we are being moved automatically back to the plenary session, and we are reporting back to the main group. And it will be Xavier and I who are charged with moving back to the reporting back. Are there any views either in the chat that you want us to bring back, or from the panel in these last 2 minutes? No. Otherwise, I would personally like to say thank you very much. Despite the technical difficulties in reading the chat and not really being able to hear people speak, I think we actually had some good discussions. I want to thank you, Audun. I want to thank you, Carl, and you, Elke, and Xavier as well. Xavier, any last words from you before we are being moved back to the plenary?
No, thank you. I think that in the level of the EMEA, we are, and also with the heads of medicine agency at the Big Data Task Force, we are working now on the Darwin EU, and this type of discussions is really important at this stage in order to make the right choices and to take the right directions into the development of the Darwin EU network.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. But then I would like to say thank you to everyone. We will go on mute now and stop the video, and then we're being moved automatically back into the main session, as I can see it, within 30 to 60 seconds. So thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for your active participation. This is only the beginning of these discussions. Thank you.
So please give me a sign from the technicians when all participants are back in the main room. So thank you very much. I heard from the technicians that everybody is back in the main room, so we will go forward with the results of the breakout sessions, and we will start with breakout session 1. And I would ask Helena and Violeta to wrap up what you have discussed and what are the key outcomes of your session. So please go ahead. Helena or Violeta, are you able to unmute? And
now I can.
okay, great.
Now I'm unmuted.
Hi, Violeta.
Hello, Carol.
So please go ahead with your wrap up.
So, as you know, the topic of our session was how can we improve access to medicines in special populations, and what changes in the two regulations could potentially lead to an improvement in access. And we had very short presentations of the 4 different scenarios which are discussed and which are now being tested, both for the pediatric and for the orphan regulation, and there are some differences. What are the elements which are in these scenarios? And then the question to the audience was, what suggestions do you have in mind which can help in this perspective? Now, one of the problems, especially for the pediatric regulation, is that our colleagues at the pediatric committee very often have to give a waiver for a certain medicine which is developed in adults, and the waiver is given because the condition does not exist in children. But on the other hand, the mechanism of action of this drug is such that it can be used and applicable for other diseases in children. And the question is, how can something be changed in the regulation to, let's say, push a little bit in the direction of development of that drug in other conditions? It is an advice as it is now, and this is always mentioned in the minutes of PDCO, but there is a wish to incentivize this in a different way, which will lead in the end to drug development in some neglected areas. So this is one question to the audience, and there were some different suggestions coming. One would be what I read in the chat. I have to look at my notes now, is that there could be some additional incentives, or that there could be suppression of Article 11b, if I noted it correctly. But also that a suggestion which came, and which is maybe valid also for the rare conditions, not only for the pediatric, was that there might be some prioritization and tolerance to, which is inherent with the clinical uncertainty which we have with ultra-rare conditions and with very few children having a certain disease. In other words, that there could be a different way to incentivize this. Now, another discussion which we had, and which was again a question to the audience, more related to the orphan regulation, that was whether there are mechanisms which we could think of related to differential incentivization of drug development according to the level of the unmet medical need, and also to the performance during drug development, but also post-marketing of the certain medicinal product. What is meant here is that there could be ideas how to provide additional rewards and incentives if a medicinal product is not only developed and brought to the market, but is also in the end made available and accessible in more or all countries of the European Union, which is a problem very well recognized nowadays. So whether there could be some mechanisms how to correlate the extent of market exclusivity or any other incentives which are now under discussion, some new, probably different incentives, to the efforts which have been made and to the final result, which is the availability and access to medicines. Then I also saw something in the chat, which I'm not sure whether it was in reference to our session, but I think it was, and it is related to the fact that maybe HTAs are having a very complex assessment nowadays, could be a little bit simplified when it is about some neglected patient populations. And then for the ultra rare conditions, there was a comment that maybe there could be some additional schemes like similar to the PRIME, which can help and accelerate development. So maybe all this has been mentioned in many other conferences and meetings, but it was another opportunity to discuss some of these elements today. And I must say that if we had more time, I believe we would have had many more and interesting ideas. But unfortunately, we had a very limited amount of time. So this is a very small summary of what we discussed in session 1. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Violeta. I think I couldn't agree more that under the bottom line, so there are many ideas in the different breakout sessions, and I think for every panel it might be a starting point to follow up on these discussions. So in the interest of time, I see that we have only 15 minutes left. I would move on to breakout session 2, and I would ask Elizabeth to share then the results of the group, and with particular with your experience.
Thank you very much, Carol. So just to wrap up what we discussed, the breakout session 2 was around the unmet medical needs and medicines and medical devices research in view of patients and health system needs. So in this discussion, we were very much focusing on the definition of what we are meaning by the unmet medical needs. We see that there is this concept, this notion has been repeated, that has been set as an objective in many strategies, different strategies, to address the unmet medical needs, but there is a lack of really definition and understanding of the concept. So as a first step moving forward, it would be good to have a more concrete definition on what we mean by this, and what in different strategies maybe it would be a different definition. So to be able to understand better what we mean would be helpful. We also need to keep pushing for meaningful patient engagement in the definition of those priorities and those needs, as the key is really to be able to, at the end of the day, meet the needs of the patients and provide address the needs that are identified and the priorities that are identified. And this could be done through a multi-stakeholder forum or public-private partnership. There was some suggestion here to look at the existing coalitions that exist and see if through those forums there would be a possibility to define better this concept. The different strategy that were mentioned were the IHI, HTA, the WHO, and the European, the Commission's definition. So it's really to bring all this together and see and understand if the definition is the same, so that we can also see how to implement that and how to address those. In terms of the multi-stakeholder forum, so it's also a better way to address better access to health innovation by developing concrete solution in a multi-stakeholder forum that would also help introduce new technologies into the healthcare systems. It was also mentioned that creating safeguards, like incentives, and also having a better governance models would allow equal partnership in the discussion and to define the strategies and to move forward. And that could be done both at European and national level. And there was a last question at the end that really was a strong question, asking if the concept of the unmet medical needs has helped to drive innovation, or on the contrary, has been used to justify lower evidence standards for the decision making. I believe that the concept of unmet medical needs is really important. It will help to make focused decisions and to make decisions that are and to drive innovation that would be meaningful and address concretely the needs to improve the quality of life of the patients. So this is what we need, but there is still ways to go, steps to move forward together to improve that understanding of what we are meaning.
Yeah, thanks Elizabeth for this concise review of your discussions, and I think it's exactly hit to the point that the definition is key and the governance in which circumstances we are moving. So César, repurposing of old medicines, this has been your group's topic. Please refer back to us.
Okay, sorry, I was mute and I couldn't do it. Thank you, Carl. I will be very brief. I think that in the discussion, it was very clear that definitely repurposing is an issue, and it's an issue that has at least two different angles to be seen. One is the things that usually do the pharmaceutical industry with the products that are still on patent or during the protection period, but that we have a niche of products that are all products out of patent, out of protection periods that can be seen as true orphans, as they are regularly used sometimes to treat a specific disease and patients, and sometimes because they may prove utility for a given disease, but that the industry do not have the incentives to develop. So there was a kind of consensus that we need to work on this segment of products that are all out of protection periods and that are not under a system of incentives that make that others that the academia or the HTA or not-for-profit organizations can work on them. But in the end, and this is for these products specifically, we need to see how these products end in the marketing of authorization holders, because I think that everyone's agreed that the academia and the not-for-profit organizations are not willing to convert themselves in marketing authorization holders. So in the end, we need to find this regulatory route to make it possible, to make possible that we change, provided we have enough data to grant the new indication, but that we find the way to do it within the regulatory system. Also, there was consensus, or at least some interventions in the same direction, that saying that not only can be done in the regulatory system, that we can find this regulatory route, that we can speed up the process, that even we can find incentives like fee exemption for these products, but that in the end that there are other things in the pharmaceutical system, substitution policies, price and reimbursement policies that in the end may have also a role in making it possible and making it affordable and workable. We have learned during this COVID-19 pandemic, and dexamethasone has been mentioned several times. And a couple of final comments. We need to find the flexibilities on the system that allow us to find the way to the repurposing without lowering the bars. So we want to maintain the same guarantees that we usually give to the patients and the healthcare professional, but without making it impossible. And also, and somehow related, we have been discussing, and probably this will be commented also by Nikolai and the other colleagues, that how this non-usual data sets coming from registries, real world data, observational studies and so on, can make a big contribution to this repurposing pathway. Or on the other hand, it will be very difficult to use this data because they will not reach the regulatory acceptances that we need to give the guarantees that we usually need. But overall, I think that a very interesting issue that is going to play at least a role in the upcoming pharmaceutical strategy in Europe. Thank you, Carl, and thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Cesar, for this fine summary, particularly including the experience in the COVID-19 situation as well regarding the corticosteroids or ibuprofen versus paracetamol and so on. So coming to the last breakout session, now it's Xavier and Nikolai on the use of big data and a European health data space. How could it be? So please, Xavier.
Yeah, I can yes, I can start, and then Nicola can complete. We addressed the question of availability and accessibility of the data from recommendation from the Joint Task Force on Big Data, and which provide as a first recommendation to ensure a secure and ethical data sharing culture. And it also promote the data discoverability. So we discussed a number of topics around these themes. And the first one that was probably the most discussed was to whom and by whom should data be shared. We shared a number of experience from regulators and from also academia, but the experience from BfArM was mentioned that there will be a research data center to be established where the data will be made available to academia, public institutions, and but not to pharmaceutical companies or the public in large. So although we recognize that ideally the data should be made publicly available, then this is difficult in practice, and the data may need to be shared at least between regulators, but also then with researchers. The question was also by whom should the data be made available, and we discussed the data that are being available with regulators, but also with companies. And what we said that it would be better to have a two-way streams of data sharing, that although regulators could share data with companies and with others, but the industry is also sitting on a very large amount of data that are extremely valuable for the evaluation of benefits of and risk of medicines. But there are some obstacles for sharing this data from companies. But also we mentioned that at the level of academic institutions, there is also some culture of competition that may prevent sharing data or sharing data from research. We discussed also, because there was a question about what would be the action necessary at the EU level to promote the sharing of data across EU borders. And actually we came a bit to the conclusion that this is a question that may not be really appropriate anymore, because actually there is now in the US, but also in Europe, the system of federated network of database that is being developed and increasingly used, which says that it is possible now with technological advances to have access to the data remotely, to make remote queries on databases, and to then export the results of this query. So there is no need to move the data anymore in order to get access to information that is provided. We discussed also the difficulty to have data, especially data from healthcare, routine healthcare, to have this data in real time. And in some countries, it may take months or even a year before the data that are collected in the electronic healthcare system can be made available for research or for regulators. So this is a difficulty that is certainly an important challenge in the future. We started a discussion, but we did not finish. We did not have the time to finish on data stewardship. So this is this system, this procedure that has been now promoted to ensure adequate and relevant expertise for data sharing, data ethics, and data protection within studies, and in order allowing them to follow the FAIR principles. So this is certainly an interesting ideas, and that we will need to follow, and that could provide them confidence and trust into the data that are being generated by industry or by regulators or by researchers. So I don't know, Nicola, if you would like to comment on this.
No, I think you covered it extremely well, Xavier, so thank you very much for that. I think we're also right on the dot out of time now. So I think you have covered everything. It was a lively discussion, a very good session. So back to you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you very much. So you pointed it out. We are out of time now. So it is now left to me to thank the presenters with the starting review and then in the breakout sessions. I thank the rapporteurs, and I can agree to Nikolai, it has been a lively chat I have seen and within the breakouts, so it's a starting point. And with that, I would like to thank Rui and his team and colleagues. As you see, you have hit the point here. You have chosen the right topics for the breakout sessions. There has been a big interest in these topics. So thanks a lot for allowing us this. And it was, I was happy to be a part of it, and it's been a great pleasure for me and all the participants. So many thanks to all of you, and wish you a good day in continuation. And now left for the short break before the panel 2 then is continued with Maria from the Spanish agency. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye.